Hi, I'm Gus Abraham, a digital art nerd, and I would love to help you breathe 3D. I welcome you to this fresh start in 3D modeling with special focus on products. I've crafted this series in a way that blends some fundamentals and theories with practicals that will help you first be competent in some basic areas, then also give you the foundation to help you explore the broad world of 3D design. If you're currently watching this video, it means you have chosen Cinema4D as your preferred software. If this is not the case, please ensure you check the other video on my channel, as that video is made for Blender users. Also, ensure you join the Telegram group for more conversations, more updates, and more growth opportunities. Before we begin, there are several ways you can support the series and the channel at large. First, you can kindly subscribe to the channel to get more classes and to get notified for subsequent series, and then you can also grab the Fresh Start bundle of clay image references. It consists of over 25 clay product references to help you practice and model more products after you take part in this training. You can get this bundle from the link attached in the description below, and it just goes for $5. Also, if you're into NFTs, you can patronize my Voguebot NFT project on OpenSea. It's a high on style 3D fashion NFT project that has a crazy utility where I create a free animated fashion NFT for every piece sold. There are just 568 items, so you can get in early now. "3D design has to do with creating a three-dimensional object or space using a computer modeling software. In simple terms, a 3D object or space is one where you can assess the depth or perspective of such space or object. In contrast to a two-dimensional object that just has two axes, which you may know as length and breadth, examples of two-dimensional objects are squares, rectangles, or circles. However, a 3D object is represented by three dimensions, which are X, Y, and Z axis. In 3D design, there are multiple workflows, pipelines, or stages that you go through to produce your final output. These pipelines vary based on the project you're working on, but there are 5 fundamental pipelines that you will usually go through in the life cycle of a project. The first is modeling or sculpting, which has to do with building or constructing your objects. The second is material creation, shading, or texturing, which has to do with the look and feel of your object and element in your scene. The third is animation, which has to do with applying motion to elements in your scene. The fourth is lighting, which has to do with adding different light types, settings, and effects to your scene. And the fifth is rendering, which has to do with viewing and exporting the processed version of your project. But for the purpose of this tutorial, we'll focus majorly on modeling, but we'll also touch on the other areas I highlighted earlier. Now for this training, the software we'll be using is Cinema4D R20. So let's go over its interface. Once you load Cinema4D, this is the interface you will see. Over here, you have your 3D viewport where you can see your objects, lights, materials, and other elements in your scene. We can also refer to this as our workspace. Over here, you have your object panel where you can find the list of the objects, modifiers, and tools in your scene. Over here, you have your attribute panel where you can find the properties and attributes of the objects in your scene. Before we go ahead, let's add an object to our scene. I'll go over here, and if I left click and hold that down, it will bring out these options. So you can select any of these objects here to bring into our scene. So I'll select this sphere over here. So as you can see, the sphere has appeared in our object panel. And if I click on this sphere, you can see its attributes here. So once you bring an object in Cinema4D, it's first in a parametric state. This means you can access the points, the edges, and polygons of this object. So what you can do is use the parameters you find in your attribute panel to then adjust this object. So if I go to the radius here, I can increase it with this option. To access the points, edges, and polygons for this object, we can go over here and click this to make this a polygonal object, or we can just hit C on our keyboard and that will make that object editable. So I'll just go over here and click this. So now we can go to the point mode to access the points of this object, we can go to the edge mode to access the edges of this object, and then we can go to the polygon mode to access the polygons of this object. We can also return here to the model mode and then we select the entire object. Over here we have our menu where we can select several tools to use in our project. and then we can also perform some other functions. So you can click any of these options to expand it, and you see here under file you can save our project, save it as, save incremental, and then perform other options here. Also under edit we can cut, copy, we can undo or redo actions in our project. So over here you have these options to undo and then redo actions in our project. Ctrl Z will be to undo an action, and then Ctrl Y to redo an action. So if I just delete this object, hitting delete on my keyboard, I can hit Ctrl Z on my keyboard and then it will undo the action, and I can hit Ctrl Y and it will redo the action. Also here, if I left click and hold this down, you see that we have several options to select our object. By default you can left click on your object to select it, but we also have other selection tools to perform dynamic selections on our object. If you go over here to select, you can access most selection options. Then if you look down over here, we have our timeline, and then over here we have our material panel. At these areas we have other tools, and we'll explore some of them as we proceed with this project. So now let's talk about navigation. In Cinema4D you have a default camera that is invisible to the eyes, but it helps us see our objects in our 3D viewport. So to rotate around this scene, we can go over here, left click and hold this icon, then just move our mouse to rotate around the object in our scene. You can also hold Alt down and then left click and move your mouse, and then it will also rotate around your scene. To pan around, you can come over to this icon, left click, hold it down and just move your mouse, and then it will pan around this way. You can also hold Alt and then also hold your middle mouse button and then just move your mouse around this way. To zoom in and out, you can come over to this icon, left click and then just drag it outwards or drag it inwards. You can also scroll your mouse wheel in and out to zoom. This fourth icon here helps us to break our panels into 4 separate viewports. So here by default you have a perspective viewport, and then here you have orthographic or flat views in different camera angles. So here, as you can see, this is the top viewport camera that's viewing the same object. Here this is the right viewport camera that's viewing this object, and then this is the front viewport camera that's viewing this object. In any of these viewports you can go over here to cameras and then change the particular viewport camera that's active. So if I change this to left, you see this changes to left over here. So these are different ways of viewing your object through different default viewport cameras. So you can go over here to any of these icons to expand that particular viewport. So if I click this, you see this expands the left viewport camera. I can also collapse that back here, and then here I can click this to expand this, collapse it back. So I'll go over here and change this back to the top viewport camera, because this is what you find by default. So we can also use some keyboard shortcuts to access those 4 panels that we just saw. So if you hit F1, you will remain in your perspective viewport camera here. If you hit F2 on your keyboard, you will go to your top viewport camera here by default, and then if you hit F3 you go to your right viewport camera. If you hit F4 you go to your front viewport camera, and if you hit F5 it will collapse all those viewport cameras. So finally, let's learn how to move, rotate or scale our object. So I'll select this object by left clicking on it. Now this tool you can see here is our gizmo tool, and then you can see it has our y-axis, our x-axis and then our z-axis. So currently we're in our move tool, and you know this if you look over here, this is what is highlighted. If you stay on this tool a little bit, you see it shows our move tool. The shortcut for accessing our move tool is E on your keyboard. So with this move tool active, you can left click on any of these axes and just move this object around this way. And then if you click any of these icons, it will isolate this particular axis. So for instance, if I click on this blue icon, it will isolate the Z axis and only move your object on the Y and X axis. So you see it will not move on the Z axis at all, even if I go towards that direction. Same applies for the other icons. To scale this object, you can hit T on your keyboard to bring your scale tool, or you can go over here to select your scale tool. And you can see our gizmo has taken on that shape at the top here. So you can left click and drag to scale this particular object on the Y axis, or scale it on the Z axis, or scale it on the X axis. To scale this object uniformly on all axes, you can left click outside the gizmo and then just drag the object. As you can see, all axes have now been selected. So this also applies for your move tool. If you click outside the gizmo, it selects all the axes and then moves the object on all the axes. Then finally, to rotate this object, To preview that better, let me just scale this object this way. So you can access your rotate tool by hitting R on your keyboard or going over here to select your rotate tool. Then you see the gizmo tool has also changed. Then you can left click on any of these axes to rotate it on that particular axis. Before we begin modeling proper, let's rehearse some tools that will often repeat as we progress with this tutorial. So we'll be using this object here to demonstrate. The first key thing to note is that this object is made up of points, edges, and polygons. And as we already learned in the previous class, you can access these points, edges, and polygons with the modes here once this object is made a polygonal object. So if I select the point mode here, I can then select any of the points. If I select the edge mode here, I can select any of these edges. So primarily to select, you just left click on the area you want to select and in the mode you want. So the first tool we'll be going through is the loop selection tool. A loop is a set of points, edges, or polygons that are continuously connected. So they can start from A and end in A, or they can start from A and end wherever they are interrupted. So let's go to our edge mode to practice this. So if you look at this edge here, and we imagine that this is the starting point of this edge, you see that if we go around, we can always come back and then stop where we started. This is a loop, and we also have some loops vertically here. So this object is made up of loops in different sizes. So to bring up our loop selection, we can either go up here to select and then choose loop selection here, or we can use a hotkey. So if you hit U on your keyboard without moving your mouse, if you move your mouse, it will take that menu away. So if you hit U without moving your mouse and you select any of the alphabets here, it will select the tool associated with the alphabet. So as you can see, L is for our loop selection. So if I hit L, that brings up our loop selection. So let's do that again. If I hit U and I hit L, that brings up our loop selection tool. And once I start moving around our mesh, it will highlight the different loops we have on this mesh. So as you can see, these are the loops we have vertically and horizontally. So I'll left click here to select this loop, and then I'll return to my move tool, or I can hit E on my keyboard. So remember, E is for move, R is for rotate, and T is for scale. So I'll hit E to return to my move tool. So once this loop is selected, I can either move this loop on any of the axes, or I can scale this loop. I'll hit T on any of the axes. This is just scaling it on the Z axis, this is on the X axis. Or if I want to scale everything together, I'll just click outside this gizmo here and to select all axes and then to scale that uniformly. Another thing I can do is to slide this loop, bevel it, or dissolve it. And I can also do more with my modeling tools. So to bring up our modeling tools, we can easily just right click as this loop is selected, and then we can select the slide tool, the bevel tool, the extrude tool, any tool we want to use. So another way to bring up these options is with another hotkey. So if you hit M on your keyboard without moving your mouse, it will bring out these options again. So as you can see, O is for slide, N is for dissolve, S is for bevel, and then other tools and actions you can perform on this loop selection here. So first, let's slide this loop. So I'll hit M and then I'll hit O to bring up the slide tool, or you right click and then you select slide over here. So I'll go to any of the edges of this loop selection, then I'll left click and drag. So this is different from the move tool as this slides the edges on the mesh. So next, I can also dissolve these edges. If I hit M and then I hit N, that will totally dissolve these edges. So let's bring that back. So let's select another loop to demonstrate beveling. So I'll hit U and then L to bring my loop selection tool. Then I'll left click to select this loop. To bring my bevel tool, I can either right click, select the bevel here, or I can hit M and then I'll hit S. So to perform a bevel action, you can go anywhere outside your mesh and then you can left click and drag. So if you drag outwards to bevel your edges this way, and you can also move your mouse freely to place this as you want. So once I'm done, I'll just release my left click. Now with the real-time update checked here, it means once you perform an action, before you do any other thing, you can still tweak the settings here. So as I've beveled this way, say I'm not satisfied with what I've done, I can still adjust the offset here before I select any other tool or move. I can still drag the offset outwards or drag it inwards, and then I can come here to add subdivisions. So that will make those corners round. So we can also make loop selections in our polygon mode. So let's go to our polygon mode here, and if I hit U and L to bring up our loop selection, you see now this is selecting the loops. So if I select this loop here, I can also perform some other modeling action. So first, I can extrude these polygons just on the surface. So if I right click, I can select extrude inner here, or I can hit I on my keyboard and it takes us to the extrude inner tool. So if I left click and just drag, you can see that this extrude is just on the surface. Note that once you use the extrude inner tool, you create an edge loop around the faces you just extruded. Then if I wanted to extrude this out of the surface, I can hit D on my keyboard, or I can also right click to select the extrude tool. So if I hit D, it brings up the extrude tool and you can make some settings here. So create caps means once we extrude this, it will still leave this set of polygons at the initial position. So if I uncheck that and I just left click and drag outwards this way, you can see it extrudes our polygons. And then I can also take this and then extrude it inwards this way. But if I check create caps and then I extrude this, it leaves this set of polygons here. So let's undo that and then uncheck create caps. Then we can extrude this inwards. Then you can hit I again to insert this, then hit D again to extrude this inwards. So it will be good for you to always ensure you return to your move tool after you performed an action and you're safe, so that you don't mistakenly want to click and move this and then it extrudes this away. So the next thing we can do is, if we're not satisfied with the loop selections we already made when we were creating our mesh and we want to make more loop cuts or manually cut some edges out by ourselves, we can use the line and loop cut tool. So we can go to our edge mode to demonstrate this. So to bring up the loop cut tool, I can hit M and L and that will bring up the loop cut. So as you can see, it's asking me to place my loop cut wherever I want to place it. You can also right click and then select loop or part cut here. So the ways to use this tool, let's say we want to make a cut here. So once I drop this cut here, I can either move the position of the cut by coming here and sliding this way. If I want to centralize this cut, I'll hit this button here, these 3 lines here, and to centralize the cut for me here. If I want to add more cuts, I'll hit this plus here, and if I want to reduce the cuts, I'll hit minus here. You can also come here and perform this action. So you can change the offset here and move this. You can increase the number of cuts or you can reduce the number of cuts here. And later when we're performing more complex actions, we'll go through all these settings. So you can just keep making cuts where you want to make it. And if you want to also just click and drag, you can also left click and you can drag and place this before you release it. So if we wanted to make some cuts manually, we can use our line cut tool. So if I right click, I can select my line cut tool here, or I can hit M and K. So I just need to go to the edges where I want to cut, and I'll just left click there. And you see to ask me to place another cut somewhere else. So if I place this cut here, you start cutting this line the way I want. And then once I'm done, I'll hit escape and that cut will be made. So now with this line selected, it has made new polygons for us and new edges. So I can go to my polygon mode and I can select any of these polygons. And I can just extrude this inwards, then I can hit D to extrude this separately. Something interesting we can do with the extrude inner tool is if we wanted to select these 2 polygons here. Currently, if we hit I and then extrude this inwards, it will extrude it as a group. But if we wanted to do this separately, you can uncheck preserve groups here in the attributes menu. And once you just click that to treat those polygons as separate polygons, then you can go ahead to hit D and then you can extrude this. So once you're done here, you can go to your object mode to move your entire object or to see what you have better. A subdivision surface multiplies the edges or segments in your mesh with the intention to smoothen that mesh and make the edges round or curved. It works with the arrangement, position, and proximity of edges in that mesh to then smoothen the edges or make them round. So let's add a cube here to demonstrate this. So I'll go over here and then add the cube. Then I'll make this cube editable by hitting C on my keyboard. Now there are 2 ways we can add a subdivision surface. We can go over here and then left click and hold this down and then just select this subdivision surface. And then once we bring it into the scene, we can drag this cube and then make it a child of the subdivision surface. And that's one way to apply it. A faster way to do this is to hold Alt before selecting this subdivision surface here, and it will automatically make this cube a child of the subdivision surface. Now 2 ways we can work with the subdivision surface. We can either disable it here, adjust our mesh, then enable it again, or we can just select our cube and then work within this surface this way, so we can see it updated in real time. So if I go to my edge mode now and then I select an edge, If I disable it here, you see that this is the edge that was selected. But then if I enable this, you see it's still the same edge. Now what has happened here is that the subdivision surface has made our mesh round based on the arrangement of our edges. So now if I begin to move this edge, you see that the shape of this mesh changes. Another key thing to note is how this works with the proximity or position of edges. So if I bring my loop cut tool in M and L on my keyboard, now it will show me our original cube and then the subdivided mesh inside. So now if I apply a cut towards the edge here and I just drop this, you see that that corner becomes tighter. That means the closer an edge is to another edge, the tighter that edge will be. So if I add another one here, you see that this corner becomes tighter. And I can also add another one here, maybe at the center. I can move it and I can drop it here. And if I select this edge and move it, you see that the shape begins to change also. So working this way is called the subdivision surface modeling technique. So we can continue working on this mesh. Say I select the polygons here, I go to my polygon mode and I select this polygon here and I hit I to extrude that inwards this way, and then I go to my move tool, I hold down Ctrl and just extrude this way. You see now we're forming a different shape within the subdivision surface. If I disable the subdivision surface, this is what we have here, and if I enable this back, this is what we have. So I can also add cuts here and also add cuts here. Now if you're not satisfied with the smoothness of your subdivision surface, you can select the subdivision surface here. So currently this object is being subdivided by 2, and then in our renderer, which is when we apply the subdivision surface, it is subdivided by 3. So this is just for preview sake for the viewport here. So you can put this at 1, and once we apply it, it will still be subdivided by 3 here. So you can also increase this. Let's just go to our display and change that to lines here so we can see that better. So if I reduce this, you see this is the number of segments we'll have. If I reduce this again, we have lesser segments, and if I reduce it again, we also have lesser segments. And then if I keep increasing this, the segments keep increasing because it keeps adding subdivisions to make this object smooth. So after you're satisfied with what you want here, make sure your renderer is also set at 2 if that's what you want for the final output. And then with the subdivision surface selected here, you can just hit C on your keyboard to apply that subdivision surface. And there you go, this is now the number of segments you have on your mesh without a subdivision surface. So this is this object with a subdivision surface, and this is this object without a subdivision surface. So if I apply this now, we have 2 objects, but this now has more segments, and then this has the former segments we put before. So both now are without a subdivision surface, but because we've applied this, we now have this smoother here. Another way to also apply your subdivision surface, you can select your object here, go to your polygon mode, hit Ctrl A on your keyboard, right click, and then under the subdivide option here, you can select this or just go to the settings over here. Now if you just want to add more segments to this mesh, you can just increase it. Let's put this at 2. It won't make this object round, it will just add more subdivisions to the object. I will do that and then come here again. Now if you want to make this look exactly like what we had here, make sure you check smooth subdivision before you click OK. So I'll check this now and then I'll just click OK. So this is what we'll have. Thank you for joining this class. In the next class, we'll start modeling proper and we'll be learning how to transform cylindrical primitives into products. We'll be modeling these 4 products alongside their detailed covers. So ensure you subscribe, and remember you can support this initiative by grabbing the product reference bundle in the description below, and you can also support by getting a Vogbot NFT on OpenSea, where you also get a free animated fashion NFT for every piece bought. All this information can be found in the description below.